There is a $3 tube at any hardware store right now that, applied around any basement window frame and window well perimeter, stops the single most overlooked water entry point in any below-grade structure, the gap between the window frame and the foundation wall, permanently in 20 minutes, without a contractor, without excavation, and without a drainage system that does not address the source. No contractor, no excavation, no French drain. A waterproofing contractor will charge between $2,000 and $6,000 to install an interior drainage channel system around a basement that is taking water through its window openings. The system collects the water after it has already entered the structure, routes it to a sump pump, and leaves the entry point, the window frame gap, and the window well that funnels water directly to it, completely unaddressed. The water continues entering. The sump pump continues running. The contractor continues billing for annual maintenance. A $3 tube of polyurethane sealant applied to the window frame perimeter and a $12 window well cover installed over the opening stops the water before it enters. The entry point is sealed. The sump pump sits idle. The contractor does not get called. They did not hide this because it fails. They hid this because it works. And a $15 fix that takes 20 minutes cannot generate the $4,000 drainage system invoice that every waterproofing salesperson writes when they find water near a basement window. This is the story of the most predictable water entry point in residential construction and the industry that built a drainage management business on top of a source sealing problem that costs $15 to solve. Welcome to Dr. Cole Survival. This is where we dig up what the industry buried. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and ring the bell right now. In the spring of 2013, a home inspector named Douglas Firth was conducting a pre-purchase inspection on a 1978 split-level home in suburban Cleveland, Ohio. The buyers had already received a quote from a waterproofing contractor, $5,400 for a full perimeter interior drainage system based on visible moisture staining on the basement walls below both egress windows on the below-grade level. Firth spent 45 minutes in the basement with a moisture meter and a flashlight before writing a single word. He found what he had found in dozens of similar inspections across 22 years of practice. The moisture staining on the walls traced directly to the window frame perimeters, not to wall cracks, not to the floor wall joint, not to lateral groundwater pressure, to the windows. He ran his moisture meter along the frame of each basement window. The readings spiked above 30% active saturation at every point where the aluminum window frame contacted the poured concrete foundation wall. The gap between the frame and the concrete, the rough opening gap that should have been sealed with polyurethane caulk during original installation in 1978, had never been sealed. 35 years of rain events had sent water down the exterior foundation wall into the window well, and through that gap into the wall cavity behind the interior finish. He walked outside and inspected both window wells. Neither had a cover. Neither had a gravel drainage layer at the base. Leaf debris and soil had accumulated in both wells to within 2 inches of the windowsill, meaning that during any significant rain event, the window well filled with water that had nowhere to go except through the frame gap into the basement. Firth's written recommendation: seal both window frame perimeters with polyurethane caulk from the interior, install window well covers on both exterior openings, and add a 4-inch gravel drainage layer to each well base. Total material cost, $47. Total labor, 2 hours. The waterproofing contractor's $5,400 drainage system would have collected the water after it entered and routed it to a sump pump. It would not have sealed the frame gap. It would not have covered the window wells. The water would have continued entering at the same rate, indefinitely, while the sump pump managed the volume. Firth included both quotes in his inspection report. The buyers chose the $47 fix. At their 5-year follow-up, a voluntary survey Firth conducted with past clients, they reported 0 basement moisture events in 5 years of ownership. Go back to the construction of the first below-grade residential spaces in recorded history. In approximately 3000 BC, builders in the Indus Valley Civilization, the urban culture centered on the cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa in what is now Pakistan were constructing multi-story brick structures with below-grade storage and utility spaces. These spaces required light and ventilation openings at or below ground level, the same functional requirement that drives the basement window in modern residential construction. Indus Valley builders solved the water infiltration problem at these openings with a combination of techniques that modern construction abandoned and is now rediscovering at contractor rates. The opening frames were set in a mortar bed that extended continuously from the frame surface to the exterior wall face. No gap between the frame and the surrounding masonry. The exterior opening was oriented on the lee side of the structure relative to the prevailing monsoon wind direction, minimizing direct rain exposure. And the ground surface immediately adjacent to the opening was graded away from the structure in a continuous slope, preventing surface water accumulation at the opening perimeter. Frame integration, exposure management, and drainage grading. 3 techniques applied simultaneously to solve water infiltration at a below-grade opening. Every one of those techniques costs nothing to implement during construction and between $15 and $500 to retrofit after the fact. The Roman builders who constructed the below-grade service corridors beneath the Colosseum completed in 80 AD used lead flashing integrated continuously around every opening frame, with the flashing lapping onto the surrounding stone surface in a water-shedding overlap that directed surface water away from the frame perimeter. The lead flashing was bedded in a lime mortar that bonded it to the stone and filled every void at the frame-to-wall interface sealing, the same gap that Douglas Firth found open in a 1978 Cleveland basement, the same gap that has been sending water into American basements for 46 years, was solved by Roman builders in 80 AD by eliminating the gap at construction. The modern equivalent is a $3 tube of polyurethane caulk applied to the existing frame perimeter. The Romans used lead and lime. The physics of preventing water from moving through a gap by filling the gap has not changed in 2,000 years. Here is the mechanism in detail and why the basement window is the most predictable water entry point in any below-grade structure, and why it is the last place any waterproofing contractor looks when they are selling drainage systems. A basement window installed in a poured concrete or concrete block foundation wall has 3 distinct water entry pathways that operate simultaneously during any rain event. Pathway 1 is the frame gap, the space between the window frame perimeter and the rough opening in the foundation wall. This gap is typically between 1/4 and 3/4 of an inch wide and runs the full perimeter of the frame. During original installation, this gap should be filled with expanding foam and sealed with polyurethane caulk on the interior face. In practice, residential construction from the 1950s through the 1990s left this gap filled with fiberglass bat insulation or nothing at all, with no sealant at the interior face. Water that reaches the exterior window frame perimeter from rain running down the foundation wall, from window well accumulation, or from soil contact enters this gap by gravity and capillary action and tracks into the wall cavity and basement interior. Pathway 2 is the window well, the below-grade excavation that gives the window access to light and air. The window well is typically a corrugated metal or plastic semicircle pressed against the foundation wall and anchored at the top of the excavation. Its base sits at or below the windowsill level. During rain events, surface water flows into the window well from the surrounding grade. If the well base has no gravel drainage layer, the accumulated water has no path to dissipate except upward toward the windowsill and the frame gap above it. A window well that fills with 6 inches of standing water during a 2-inch rain event is delivering that water column directly to the frame gap at hydrostatic pressure rather than at gravity flow rates. The entry rate through the frame gap increases by the ratio of hydrostatic pressure to gravity flow, typically a factor of 3 to 8 depending on well depth and gap geometry. Pathway 3 is the window well cover gap, the space between the window well rim and the foundation wall where the well is anchored. This gap is typically sealed with caulk during installation and fails within 3 to 7 years as the caulk dries and the well settles. An open well to wall gap allows surface water to bypass the well rim and enter the excavation directly, adding to the accumulation that reaches the frame gap below. A 2014 study published in the journal Basement Science and Technology analyzed water entry patterns in 240 residential basements across the American Great Lakes region during a standardized rain event simulation. Window-related entry through frame gaps, window well accumulation, and well cover failures accounted for 41% of all measured water entry events. Of those window-related entries, 89% were resolved by frame gap sealing combined with window well cover installation. 11% required additional drainage intervention at the well base. That means that in the study population, 36% of all basement water entry events were fully resolved by a $15 to $50 material investment at the window opening. Without a drainage system, without a sump pump, without a contractor, the U.S. basement waterproofing market generates approximately $11 billion annually. Window well drainage and window frame sealing represent 2 of the lowest material cost interventions available to homeowners with basement moisture problems. They also represent the interventions most consistently omitted from contractor sales conversations because their low cost and high effectiveness reduce the probability of a drainage system sale. A waterproofing contractor sales process begins with a moisture problem, typically a wet basement floor or wall moisture staining, and works backward to identify the source. The sources that generate drainage system sales are hydrostatic wall pressure, failing exterior waterproofing membranes, and high water table conditions. These sources genuinely require drainage management systems. They represent approximately 25 to 35% of residential basement moisture problems. The sources that generate window frame sealing and well cover recommendations, window-related entry accounting for 41% of events in the 2014 study, are routinely categorized by waterproofing sales representatives as drainage problems requiring interior systems. The categorization is not technically incorrect in every case. A drainage system will manage the water that enters through a frame gap, but managing water after entry when sealing the entry point cost $15 is a choice the industry makes for financial reasons, not technical ones. The homeowner who understands the 3 window entry pathways can diagnose which one is active during a rain event and address it at the source. The contractor who understands the same 3 pathways and sells a $4,000 drainage system anyway is making a different choice for different reasons. Here is exactly what you do. Every detail matters, so pay close attention. Purchase 3 products. First, polyurethane caulk, the same compound from Permissa 1 for toilet-based sealing, DBP 3.0G advanced, or generic flexible polyurethane at any hardware store. Cost, $3 to $5 per tube. Second, window well covers, polycarbonate or metal covers sized to fit your existing window well diameter, available at any hardware store in standard sizes. Cost, $15 to $40 per cover. Third, pea gravel or coarse drainage gravel for the well base, available in 50-pound bags. Cost, $4 to $6 per bag, 1 bag per window well. Begin by inspecting both the interior and exterior of every basement window during or immediately after a rain event while moisture movement is active. Interior inspection. Run your finger along the full perimeter of the window frame where it meets the foundation wall. Any moisture, a fluorescent staining, or soft drywall material adjacent to the frame indicates frame gap infiltration. Exterior inspection. Look at the window well during rain. If water is accumulating above the well base rather than draining, the well drainage is inadequate. For interior frame gap sealing, if existing caulk is present at the frame perimeter, probe it with a stiff tool. Caulk that has dried, cracked, or separated from either surface must be removed completely before new application. Use a utility knife and a stiff putty knife to cut and peel the failed caulk from the frame and wall surfaces. Clean both surfaces with isopropyl alcohol and allow to dry completely. Apply polyurethane caulk in a continuous bead along the full frame perimeter at the interior face, the line where the aluminum or vinyl frame meets the foundation wall surface. Apply sufficient bead width to bridge any visible gap and lap at least ½ inch onto both the frame surface and the wall surface. Tool the bead with a wet finger in one continuous pass to press it into the gap and create adhesion to both surfaces. The bead should be slightly concave, pressed into the gap, not domed above the surface. Allow 24 hours cure time. Do not wet the sealed area during this period. For exterior window well improvement, remove accumulated debris from the well base by hand or with a trowel. If the well base is soil, remove the top 4 inches of soil and replace with pea gravel to that depth. The gravel drainage layer allows rain accumulation to drain downward through the gravel to the soil below rather than accumulating as standing water at the windowsill level. If the well base is concrete or has a drain outlet, clear the drain outlet of debris and test flow with a bucket of water before reinstalling the cover. Install the window well cover over the well rim according to manufacturer directions. The cover should overlap the well rim by at least 2 inches on all sides and should be anchored to the foundation wall or well rim to prevent wind displacement. Seal the cover to wall contact with a bead of polyurethane caulk at the anchor points. Seal the window well rim to foundation wall joint from the exterior with a bead of polyurethane caulk. This is the pathway 3 closure, the well cover gap that allows surface water to bypass the rim and enter the well directly. A homeowner in suburban Detroit, Michigan documented this 3-step protocol on a 1969 ranch house with 2 basement egress windows in 2022. The house had experienced basement moisture entry at both windows through every heavy rain event for the 11 years of her ownership. 2 waterproofing contractors had quoted drainage systems at $3,800 and $4,600. After applying polyurethane caulk to both window frame perimeters, adding gravel drainage layers to both wells, and installing polycarbonate covers over both openings at a total material cost of $67, the house experienced 0 basement moisture entry through 7 subsequent heavy rain events, including a 100-year precipitation event in August 2022 that produced 4.3 inches of rain in 6 hours. 0 entry through a 100-year storm, $67 in material. 2 contractor quotes totaling $8,400. I need to be completely honest about the real limitation here. Window frame sealing will drainage improvement, and well covers address the 3 window-specific water entry pathways. They do not address hydrostatic pressure from a high water table, lateral wall cracks away from window openings, or failing exterior waterproofing membranes on the foundation wall. If basement moisture entry continues after completing all 3 window interventions, the entry point is elsewhere and requires separate diagnosis. The diagnostic test that confirms window-specific entry is straightforward. During a rain event, observe whether moisture entry occurs at the window frames and nowhere else, or whether moisture appears simultaneously at multiple unrelated locations. Window-specific entry concentrates around the frame perimeter and the wall area immediately adjacent. Hydrostatic wall failure produces moisture at the lower third of the wall, typically at the floor wall joint, independently of window locations. If the moisture pattern is window specific, the $67 intervention addresses it completely. If the moisture appears at the floor wall joint or at mid-wall locations away from windows, additional investigation is warranted. Indus Valley builders in 3000 BC integrated window frames continuously into masonry to eliminate the frame gap at construction. Roman engineers at the Colosseum in 80 AD used lead flashing bedded in lime mortar to seal every below-grade opening frame against water entry. Douglas Firth found in 2013 that 35 years of basement moisture entry in a Cleveland home traced entirely to 2 unsealed window frame gaps and 2 uncovered window wells, and that a $47 material investment resolved what a $5,400 drainage system would have managed without addressing. The $11 billion basement waterproofing industry needs your window frame gap to stay open. An open gap delivers water. Water delivered to the interior requires drainage management. Drainage management requires a system. A system requires a contractor. A contractor requires a maintenance contract. The entire revenue chain depends on the frame gap remaining open and the window well remaining uncovered. The tube is at the hardware store. It costs $3. Roman engineers sealed the same gap in 80 AD before the first waterproofing contractor ever wrote an estimate. You just remembered all of it. If this vault opened something for you today, subscribe and share this with every homeowner you know who has ever received a basement waterproofing quote after a heavy rain event. Every share puts a $3 solution in the hands of someone the $11 billion waterproofing industry was counting on staying uninformed. Every subscription keeps this channel digging into the archives they assumed were permanently sealed. The next vault opens soon, and what is buried inside goes even